works well. Okay. So I'm here today with Bill Lennon. How's it going, Bill?
Good, Matt. Good to see you again.
Good to see
How's life?
you again. Life is going pretty well. It's pretty cold here in Canada. You're in California. How has life been going for you?
It is not from a global perspective, it's not very cold here. Yeah, it's, I wouldn't say t-shirt weather, but it's in the 50s. So not like it's a big deal.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you again for coming on. We have done a few podcasts in the past. I was on yours and you were on mine back when I was doing
Mhm.
more mental health focused stuff. You're doing all kinds of good mental health focused
Yep.
work. And now you have a new project called 40% Better, where you're focusing
Mhm.
specifically on leadership. So thank you again for coming on and look forward to talking a bit about leadership, um, the points that men struggle with leadership, and nice guy syndrome. So thank you for
Yeah,
agreeing to coming on and talk
sure,
about this
sure.
stuff.
Great subject. Yeah, yeah,
So let's jump into it. Where
yeah.
would you say, just as kind of an open, just to open the book, like at what points do men struggle with leadership that you've seen, kind of the big points that they struggle with?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, I think, to go to the kind of root cause analysis, I always think about, if I can't lead myself well, I can't lead my team well. And if I can't lead myself well, I can't lead my family well either. And so, for me, it's this kind of holistic um, approach of thinking about leadership, not just of other people, but also what am I doing to lead myself well, right? And I think about this as we all have goals, aspirations, systems we want to implement. And if we're if we're looking at just for ourselves, something simple like I want to get to the gym on a regular basis, how do we lead ourselves to make that happen, right? And what are our self-awarenesses around that or not, right? How do we not understand and not pay attention to the reasons why we don't go to the gym as much as we want to? And it's the same kind of approach with my team, right? I look at my team as I want them to be performing really well and happily, right? And I need to have awareness of what's going on with them. I need to understand the goals. I need to understand the frictions, and I need to be able to apply a lot of the same tools to get myself to go to the gym as getting my team to perform really, really well.
Okay. Very interesting. So the ability to lead yourself will then enable you with the ability to lead others.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
sort of the core message.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I think of, and I mentioned this earlier when we were talking before the show started, but I think of everything, literally everything, as being some kind of a system or a process. And that if you understand and practice it, then it becomes easy. And if you don't understand it or you don't practice it, it's somewhere between hard and magic,
Mm,
because everything that we like, math, right? We all learn math. We take for granted that we can do addition in our head. Yesterday, I was talking with my girlfriend. She was in her head multiplying three-digit numbers together for a project we're working on and taking it for granted. But if you don't know what math is, like if you come from a hunter gatherer tribe whose complete math structure is one, two, three, and many, you can't do multiplication or any of the math that we take for granted, right?
right.
And so leadership is the exact same thing. Really being able to do leadership effectively on yourself, your team, whatever, it's understanding what the pieces are in the system or the process, and then learning how to implement them effectively and become really good at it. It's like juggling.
Right. Okay. So if we took the example of working out, just because I think it's an easy example, like leading yourself to work out,
Mhm.
what would be the processes there, or like sort of what you're talking about of these individual pieces to get
Sure, of
yourself to
course.
work out?
So I always start with mental models, right? What's the why behind it, right? Simon Sinek talks about start with why, um, and you have to have. I have a really good reason for going to the gym. I've had a really good reason to go to the gym most days of the week since I was 20, and that is long-term health. And for me, it's I'm afraid of my health deteriorating because I've seen elderly people and even I've seen people who at the time that I saw them were younger than I am today, who had a lot of physical infirmities, and I never wanted to be that person, right? And so the fear of where those people were at when I was 20, I said I'm going to the gym and I'm going to go run and ride my bike and get in the water, and I'm going to train consistently, and I'm going to figure out how to have training every day be my baseline. And so that was 40 years ago. And so, yesterday I was like, I need to go to the gym. Okay, let's go. Away we go. Right. Um, I probably average 6 days a week right now of exercise. And the why is what got me here.
Mhm.
Right. The next piece is understanding what are all the variables involved in it. Over the years, I've I've because I have that why, like I made it a habit. Right. Early on, I had to think about, oh, I got to go to work. I got to go to the gym after work. Right. I get home from work, change clothes, hop on my bicycle, ride to the gym. The gym was a mile away from my apartment in college. And so that was what I did. I made that a habit. And I had in my calendar that I was going to go to the gym every night or 3 nights a week after I got home. And this was back then I was had a very physical lifestyle. And so the gym was just on top of pretty much exercise 7 days a week anyway. When I got out of college, I was bicycling 5 days a week because I bicycled to work, and oftentimes I bicycled on the weekends also. Um, and then I started lifting again with a guy that I was working with, and that some version of that has played out. I've done a bunch of different sports over the years. Um, everything from windsurfing to rock climbing. Um,
So the
but
why was the most important part of like
the why was
in
the
the
most
beginning.
important part. Yeah, in the beginning it was the why, and then it was starting off by making it a very conscious habit, right? Very conscious process, getting the exercise. It's in my calendar, it's scheduled, I'm going, right? Uh, along the way, I also got other people to go along with me. And I got people to go along with me until I got to the point where I didn't need to have anybody else be involved. Um, last yesterday when I went to the gym, I wasn't going there with any of my friends. I just knew that I needed to get there, looked at what all I had to do in the course of the day, and was like, oh, here's a time slot, I'm going to go. Uh, um, and so it's become it's kind of like I get up and I have coffee in the morning. You know, every day I get up and I'm like, okay, I got to make coffee and I got to get exercise. How are those two things going to happen? And how do I put it into my schedule? Um,
So how
with
does this then relate to
the
leading
leadership.
others?
Yeah, yeah. So good question, and it's not as maybe not as obvious, but if you can lead yourself to do consistently, repeatedly good behavior, then exercise, right? Then now we start to look at, okay, how do I get this group of people to do something that's good for them? Well, first of all, you have to have a good why. You've got to be able to have a good conversation about why it's important for me as a leader to help my team operate better, right? I have to have an intrinsic motivation to be thinking about how to move forward in this context, right? And so for me, I look at the team as people that I like for the most part, and B, they have a responsibility and I have a responsibility to be as productive as possible for the company that pays us. And so the best use of my time as team lead, irrespective of what the title happens to be, supervisor, manager, whatever, is to have them be happy and operating more effectively. And so my foundational mental model is that my job is all about helping them be more effective. Right? That's it. That's the core of everything, is that my job is to help the team be more effective. And from there, I actually have a lot of freedom, because now I can look at, okay, why aren't they being effective? What's going on? And it's individualized, right? Each person has a little bit different set of frictions. It's like my kids, right? Both of my kids are my kids, but they operate very differently mentally. And so the place that's a friction for one isn't a friction for the other one, right? And their interests are very different, right? So I have to be customized in how I'm approaching them. So, I've got a team, and so I have to look at, okay, how are they operating? Where is it that they talk about friction? What's the low-hanging fruit? Where do I start? And in being able to listen and recognize when there's frictions that people don't talk about because they don't know how to. And at the same time, I can see that it has an impact on the team's performance. And so part of this is, if I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm not going to the gym because whatever I'm afraid of, right? I've got a friend that he wants to go to the gym, but he's afraid he doesn't look good enough, right? He's like, I don't have a great body like all these people at the gym. I can't go. I'm like, well, but they all started going to the gym looking bad. So you might as well get over that fear, right? When you got a software team, you have to be able to talk to the people and understand where the individual frictions are. And sometimes those frictions are going to be consistent across the board. Like, I had a software team a few years ago. Everybody complained their computers were too slow. It was universal. And so I figured out how to get them new computers. Right. And that made them happier because they felt like they were being heard. And now they've been complaining about slow computers for 3 years. And when I got there, the guy that had been running that team previously hadn't been able to get them new computers. I figured out how to go to the executives and get the budget for those new computers. And it made the team happier because they felt heard and they started working better. It may be an individual thing. I had one person on the team that wanted to change really change the whole team schedule, so they could get their kid to school in the morning. And we had a meeting that was, I want to say it was at 8:30, and she couldn't make that consistently and get her kid to school. So I was like, okay, can you do 9? And she was like, yeah, if it's 9 o'clock, easy, I can do it, right? So I talked to the whole team and I'm like, hey, we'd like to change this meeting so that she can consistently be here and have it be easy. And everyone in the team was like, okay, no problem, easy, great, let's do it, right? It's a friction removing process, and everybody is a little bit different. So part of the way that I look at it is that if I can understand the friction, whether it's my friction or the team's friction, right? Because there's a lot of friction that I've had to resolve for myself over the years that allowed me to be more effective, right? That's been a critical piece of it. And it goes back to leading myself first, right? I have to be able to handle my own friction first. And I tend to think of myself as a fairly nice guy. And I've got a set of responsibilities and a set of skills and a set of mental models that allow me to get things done that other people don't get done. And it doesn't usually cause friction in the company because I've figured out how to do it so that other people see the benefit in it just as I do. Like, when I needed to get laptops, new computers for my team, I figured out the economic perspective about why it was a good idea to buy those computers, so that our VP, who said we don't have budget, as soon as I explained to him how many man hours we were losing because of the slow computers, he said, "Oh my God, no one ever told me this before. You'll have them first thing in the morning." And we did, right? So, on the one hand, I'm being nice, but on the other hand, I'm being effective, right? And for me, it's all about being effective.
Yeah.
Um, and but it kind of goes back to, what are your mental models and what are your skills, right? My mental model is that as a team lead, they're my responsibility to help them be more effective, just like my kids are, right? And so I think about, what are the things my team needs to learn? What are the frictions that need to be handled in the process? Um, and and how do we make that happen? Yeah.
So the self-awareness of understanding the frictions inside yourself help you read the situation or read the friction that's happening with your team in front of you and be able to understand it so that you can make those changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I can't, like, I don't know how to fly an airplane, right? I couldn't teach you to fly an airplane.
Mm.
Thinking I could teach you to fly an airplane would be a bad idea, right? Because I have no clue how airplanes work. However, there's a bunch of other things that I do know how to do. And so, and so I can see, oh, wait a minute, Matt's having a struggle with this particular thing. Great. I know how to do that thing. I know how to baby step him through understanding, first of all, the why of learning this thing and understanding it, and then teaching him the skills, starting with the simplest starting point to build his skill stack, right? So he can do it. It's like math. Excuse me. I use math as an analogy because we all take math in school, right? And we take for granted the level of complexity of math that we achieve because it's such a consistent, repeatable process. Pretty much everybody I've ever talked to made it at least to geometry. And in the grand scheme of the world, geometry is actually quite complicated math, right? Can you hang on for 1 sec?
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay,
No,
this
it's
is a
okay.
big question. It was really loud. Um,
Do you maybe have headphones or something? And there is a little bit of background noise that might come through later.
even if I put, they stopped washing the dishes. I asked them to
Okay.
stop.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah, not a problem.
Um,
Um, so the leadership thing is really understanding how to do it for yourself first, and then helping other people. Right? Hang on. Okay. So when we understand ourselves and we can lead ourselves, right, then we can translate that knowledge to somebody else. Right? Again, back to the math analogy, right?
mm,
I was able to help my kids with math as they were growing up until their math class got to a level beyond my understanding. Right? My older son started doing some crazy calculus. I have no idea how it works. And I was like, okay, we got to find you a tutor because I can't help you. Luckily, he had friends at school that were really, really good at it. And they were able to help him out. In a workplace setting, it's being able to help people with wherever their frictions are, and then and preferably what to do, right? At least enough to get them to a level where they're comfortable and have a competency that removes the friction in the team. So I'll give you an easy example, right? One of the biggest struggles I see inside teams is, and for team leads, is communication. Everything relies on communication, right? And if you can't communicate as a team lead your message effectively to the people on your team, they're not going to do whatever it is you want them to do, right? Seems fairly simple. There's a couple of communication structures for how to communicate effectively. One of them, we use acronyms a lot. It's called GIVE, and it's about how to be ultimately a good listener, how to hear other people really, really well, and how to present ideas in a way that's non-threatening. Because if you're a team lead, people can often be uncomfortable because of the power dynamic that they perceive between you and your leadership role and them as somebody who reports to you, right? So you have to be able to get them to be vulnerable in the conversation. And GIVE is a great way to do this, right? So you can hear where their friction is, right? That's number one. That's the first part of it, is understanding what's going on. The second is a stat called Dearman. And this is about how to present information in such a way that the data that helps me see something as self-evident is also data that they can understand and go, oh, now I get it, right? And this makes the communication work effectively versus just saying, hey, you need to go do that because I say so.
Yeah, don't ask questions, just go and do it.
Right.
You have to do it because I'm the boss, and that's why you should go do it.
Right. And you get a lot farther when people own the value of doing it for themselves than you do than you do when it's do it because I say so. Right.
The value being in the data.
Well, the value is in the data and how it's going to be beneficial for them to do something. Right. So you have to present it in a way that the benefit is for them. Right. It's a bit like a sales conversation.
Yeah.
Same kind of idea, right? You're talking about here's the benefits of whatever it happens to be, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's doing a piece of research, or it's changing business processes, or writing a chunk of code, or taking out the trash, right? It doesn't matter what it is. You have to be able to present it in such a way that for that person, they can wrap their head around the benefit. And then they have ownership. And this is one of those things that I learned early on, and that I continually found wasn't, people talked about it, but they didn't know how to implement it, is when you get people on your team to have ownership of solving a problem, and like they really get that it's like their baby to work on, they put a lot more effort and thought into it.
Yeah.
And if it's just do it because I said so, right? And so I can both be nice and effective because I'm giving you both the responsibility and all the accolades for solving this kind of a problem.
How would micromanaging fit into that equation? Would that be the opposite of that?
So
letting them take
micromanaging is taking somebody's ownership away.
Yeah.
And a piece of this is, so there's so talking about mental models, right? Back up. One of the mental models that I carry is that I take really good care of the people on my teams. Number one. Number two is it's a privilege for somebody to work for me, because I know that I'm really good at taking care of my teams. And if you're going to take advantage of me and you're going to not do the work, which really it's not taking advantage of me, it's taking care of the whole team, right? If you're slacking because I'm being nice, we're going to have a conversation about it, and we're going to talk about what's going on, right? and I'm going to try and figure out what's a good fit for you. Right. And that's the part of the conversation. Micromanagement happens when, as a leader, I don't think people are able to do their work effectively. And I'm afraid that that's going to impact the rest of the team. That's my generous way of putting it.
Yeah.
Right. Uh, and so if I'm going to give people ownership, I can't micromanage. I have to say, here, this is all your responsibility now to go play with. I trust that you're going to come up with an amazing solution. If you get stuck, let's talk about it. The whole team here is available to back you up. And if you need resources that are outside of this team, I'll help you find them. And that way, it's your game now. It's not mine anymore. And we'll have regular check-ins, and I'm not just going to turn you loose for 6 months and then wait for something to come back. But I am going to give you a lot of rope to figure out how to do this stuff effectively.
Why do you think men in particular struggle with leadership? Whether it's leadership at work, leadership as a father, or relationship, or otherwise.
No one's taught them a system for being effective and getting what they want. And nobody, like, I had to figure this stuff out. And I did a lot of research in a lot of different areas to really understand, number one, why I was being successful where other people weren't. And I couldn't figure out what, like, I didn't know how to explain it. Right. I was in a place of unconscious competency. And so I had to get a lot of help to be able to reverse engineer what I was doing and to recognize, oh, wait a minute, most people don't think like this. And so they don't learn the skills to back up being effective in this way. Like, most team leads don't really understand and don't wrap their head around that the most important job they have is making their people be happy and effective. And so if guys don't know that, then there's a lot of struggle involved because they don't have a mental model that supports them being effective in leading teams. And they don't get taught how to be really good communicators, because oftentimes our communication role models aren't effective communicators. Like, I grew up swimming competitively, and I had coaches who said, do this because I said so.
Right.
Change your stroke technique and do this because I said so. Right. And I would do it, but I didn't understand why I was doing it. And when I was 7, 8, 9, I was willing to hear it that way. But when I was 12 and 14, 15, 17, coach had to explain to me, they had to say exactly why. And I had, in high school, I had 2 different coaches. And one of them was do it because I said so. And the other one explained it to me why they wanted me to make some particular change in my stroke technique or breathing or whatever it was. The coach that explained the why got better results from me. And so you have to be able to have the communication work effectively so that
Yeah.
the people you're communicating with buy into what's going on. Right. And they have to understand the data and why it's going to be beneficial to them.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that it's beneficial to me as the team lead, but the construct has to be. And so I do this with my kids. Right. I'm like, I know you don't want to do this, and it's going to be beneficial for you to do this, and here's why. And they understand it, right? Because I don't tell them to do stuff that I don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my kids train probably 5 days a week, and they're both in college. And they do it because they know I've been training since before they were born. And that on any given day, if they go, hey, Dad, how was the gym today? I'll say, oh, here's what went on, right? Or, oh, I went for a long bike ride instead, right? So I'm modeling behavior that I want my teams to be doing. So this is one of the gotchas potentially. If you don't want to model behavior that you want your team to do, then you're gonna have problems, right? As team leads, we're role models just as we are for our kids. And so we have to have that kind of that idea in the back of our head.
So
And
there's
yeah,
similar to being a father, this is being a team
very
leader,
much.
same leader, your role model. You get to lead by example.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And you have to figure out along the way, how do I evolve what I'm doing as the team evolves? Right. So your kids, when they're born, when they're babies, they can't take instruction, right? Like they don't know how to, they don't understand English language, right?
They can't deadlift.
No, they can't deadlift at all. Yeah. Yeah. They can't even do a push-up until, they can roll over and then they crawl, right?
Yeah.
As time goes on, and when they're little, you can use command and control as a communication methodology. Do this because I say so, and they'll do it, and they're totally fine with it, right? You tell your 3-year-old do this, and they'll be like, okay, right? When they get older, you have to start giving them a lot more of a coaching approach, and structure it as, here's why this is healthy for you,
Mm.
and they go, oh, okay, and they might not like it, but they understand the value of it, right? Because you can say, look, if you do this, here's the benefits. If you don't do this, here's the consequences, right? If you study, you get good grades in school, and you'll have an easy time with it, and we give you more privileges. If you don't study, you get bad grades in school, and we start taking away privileges,
Mm-hmm.
right? Simple conversation, right? You can do the exact same thing with your team at work. Hey, we're struggling with this particular whatever it happens to be. We need to modify some business processes to have that be more consistent, whatever our success metrics happen to be, right? Let's talk about, what do we do, right? Where's the friction for us as a team? It could be me, right? It could be that I need to change something that I'm doing to help everybody else be more effective, right? Because I'm part of the team, right? Being a team lead doesn't mean I'm not part of the team, right? And so I've got
Yeah.
to look, first of
Yeah.
all, as, is the friction my fault? Right? This goes back to leading ourselves. Is one of the starting questions wherever there's friction is, uh, it's not you, it's me, right? And if that's the case, then what do I got to do?
Do you think men in today's world have trouble addressing their own friction? And that may be a starting point for leadership,
Yeah,
struggling
I
with
think
leadership.
it's, yes. I think they have problems addressing their own friction, and it goes back to having role models and having those conversations, right? And having somebody they can talk with, and and it's okay, right? My elder son called me last night, and and it was like 5 o'clock ish, and he said, "Hey, Dad, I'm really struggling, and I need some help." And I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" He said, I there's these 5 things I want to get done today, and I've gotten 3 of them done, and I just can't seem to get the other 2 done. And I said, "Okay, so let's talk about it." You know, um, and and as we were talking about it, I said, "Okay, so one of these things is actually really simple. Why don't you do it while we're talking on the phone, and I'll just keep you company, right?" And he was like, "Oh, okay, well, I can do that." And so he did that, and then I'm like, "Okay, what's what else are you thinking about in the back of your head that needs to be done that you could also be doing?" And he added 2 other things into his list and got them done while we were sitting there on the phone, because I was a companion, right? I didn't do any of the stuff. He was doing everything needed to be done. I was just a companion, and he was able to get stuff done. I'm just sitting there on the phone talking with him, right? Super easy. Um, my being willing to be in the conversation removed the friction for him to let him go and do that work. And so, in a way, I'm modeling for him how to help other people.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Um,
So men not having that, they never had that, so they don't know how to give that to others. They
right.
never had that
Right.
coach, that model, that mentor that
Yeah.
gave them that help that they needed at that time.
Right. Right. Um, Self awareness is really valuable. and it can be uncomfortable because none of us are perfect, and yet we need that self-awareness to be able to understand where we generate our own friction, because the thing that is hard for us to do for somebody else is super easy. It's not that the thing itself is intrinsically hard, it's that we don't know how to do it effectively. Right?
Yeah.
Nothing in the world is intrinsically hard. Juggling is not hard, but if you don't know how to do it effectively, then it's impossible. Right? But if you start juggling and you practice, practice is a really important part of this. If you practice, all of a sudden you can juggle, and then it becomes easy. And then you can start, oh, well, I've been doing these sand filled bean bags. Now I'm going to try 3-pound medicine balls or 2 eggs and a butter knife, whatever it is you want to do. Right. But you have to learn the process and the system, and then it becomes easy.
Something we had talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
prior to doing the podcast, was nice guy syndrome. And you had mentioned that you see guys sometimes struggle with being assertive.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Kind of
yeah.
go back and forth. It'd be between being too assertive or too much of a pushover, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about that? Why do you think guys struggle with nice guy syndrome
Um,
or being assertive?
yeah. So it's a multi-variable equation, as many things are. One of them is that a lot of times guys struggle with, I might be criticized for this, right? And they want to avoid criticism. And I don't know about your education system, but our education system here is really focused on, you got to get it right. and people are shamed for bad grades. And that and parents are complicit in this, right? Parents are like, how come you're not getting good grades? Your brother, your sister, your friend, a straight A student, how come you aren't? Right? Which is not an effective way to educate people. And that's one of those pieces that stops people from being assertive, because they don't learn to trust themselves. They don't learn to trust their own voice and their own communication, and they become afraid of being criticized for saying, hey, why don't you go do blah blah blah, right? Or I need XYZ, right? I need to go to the gym. Like, I'm really clear, and everyone I've ever dated knows that exercise is a thing for me, right? And I just tell them, like, look, this is the game, it's a boundary, right? And people have been upset when I've said, hey, I've got to go to the gym. But they also understand that it's just, that's a requirement for me. I need to brush my teeth, right? And so you have to give guys contexts where they can start practicing being assertive and baby stepping their way in. And part of it is being assertive in a way that is about getting what they want, right? And part of it is about learning how to communicate better so that it's easier for other people to say yes. And I would say the starting point is learning how to communicate in such a way that for the other people around you, it's easy to say yes to your requests, whether it's I want XYZ or I don't want XYZ, right? Either one of those things. Here's a boundary, right? I don't want green peppers on my pizza ever again, because I don't like green peppers, right? figuring out how to start saying that to people. And you know, the the easiest way to do it is order a pizza, and that's a combination pizza that includes green peppers, and say, by the way, please don't put green peppers on my pizza. Okay, great. They'll probably say yes, right? Unless the whole thing's,
Hopefully.
hopefully, right? Unless it's prepackaged, frozen, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then you see, wow, okay, you're not the right store for me.
Mm-hmm.
I need to order a pizza from somebody that will do this for me, right? But it's figuring out the baby step practice to get used to speaking your desire.
Saying no, saying no to certain things that
Yeah,
you don't want, like speaking out.
exactly. Right. I don't want green peppers on my pizza, or, you know, in my salad, or whatever it is, right? Or it could be, hey, can you please throw extra onions on, or
Mm-hmm.
extra garlic, or extra sausage, or whatever it is you want on your pizza? I want extra. And they may charge you for it, and that's okay, right? It's you getting used to the idea of not of speaking up for yourself, right? Of not just accepting the default thing, right? And it starts with little tiny things that seem almost inconsequential.
Mm-hmm. So the school system,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
with there being such an overemphasis of grades, getting good grades, avoiding
right.
criticism, it's almost like the school system's like there's just one way. You have to study, you have to like
Yeah,
get good
yeah,
grades, and if you're not doing that,
yeah,
then if you don't fit into this perfect box that we created, then like you're doing everything wrong.
right.
And it just seems
Yeah,
like, because
exactly.
I know like boys in particular struggle with sitting still and struggling in school way more than girls currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So it just makes sense that guys are just like
yeah.
kind of
I'm
pigeonholed into this way of
yeah.
thinking.
Um, I think there's a lot of different parts to this in terms of how males are either culturally or genetically wired different than females. um, I think we need way more physical activity.
Yeah.
I got a ton more physical activity growing up than, and I was, you know, like growing up, I was around a lot of girls that were competitive swimmers, and I still got more physical activity than they did. Um, and that helped me stay calm in school.
Yeah.
That was, you know, one of those pieces of the puzzle. I also had a lot of freedom to go run around in the world and spend a lot of time outdoors, and I think that's one of those things that males need is to be out and exploring,
Yeah.
and not looking at video games on their phone, like actually out being observant and aware of the environment you're in.
Yeah.
um, and I think we need to find contexts where we can practice being assertive in a variety of ways, and um, having people who can coach and mentor us and teach us how to do it effectively in a way that we can learn it, right? It's one thing to tell somebody, oh, you should be more assertive. Okay, you should learn how to swim too. But teaching somebody how to swim, right? Starting with the most fundamental thing of hold your breath and put your face in the water, right? And so if you're going to get somebody to be assertive, you got to be able to get to the point of, okay, what is it you want to be assertive about, right?
Right.
Because, you know, it may be that you have an easy time asking somebody for help making pizzas at work, but you don't know how to ask for vacation time, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you know, there's some woman that you like to get to know better, right? You don't know how to start a conversation with her. That's a type of being assertive.
Yeah.
And so So it's not just the assertion of here's my boundary. It's what are all these other communication things you need to work on. And it's the same thing when you're, personal relationships or at work.
Yeah.
So it's understanding where do you want to start? What's the first thing you want to work on in the pantheon of assertive conversations? And then where do you go from there?
I think that's very helpful. I think that'd be very helpful for a lot of guys because it's like, how do you start? Because I've seen this and like even certain situations myself where it's like, okay, maybe you're at zero. And then, what you're saying is take small steps. You can
Yep.
try to go all in at once and then you end up just overdoing it way too much. And then
Right,
you
right.
go from like a nice, way too nice guy, way too agreeable to being like a disagreeable asshole. Because it's like you overshoot the boundary, overshoot the target.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
you got to pull back, but
yeah. And it's part of it is that when we are comfortable in our communication ability, we can relax and our body language changes and the way that we talk and we communicate with people changes and we're not projecting any fear and they can hear us differently and then it's easier for them to say yes,
right.
right? And if it's something that we're not smooth and consistent and elegant at because we don't have the practice, then there's all kinds of friction. We've actually created we're doing it ourselves. We're throwing our own friction into the process because we
Yeah.
don't know how to be smooth and elegant, right? It's like, if do you know how to juggle?
No.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 raw eggs and a steak knife, and I want you to juggle them for me, right? But you
Yeah.
don't know how to juggle, right? So you're probably going to end up with a mess on the floor and maybe some blood,
Yeah.
right?
Knife in my foot. Right.
Right, exactly, right. And so, you'd have trepidation even starting, right? Because you'd be thinking, oh my God, I might have a knife in my foot, right?
Mhm.
Rightly so. But if you had started juggling 5 years ago and now you're really, really good at it, and you've already been juggling knives, right? If I said, hey, I got 2 raw eggs and a knife, you'd be like, well, I can juggle 3 raw eggs and I can juggle knives. Okay, mixing the two together, let's see what happens, right? Let me go out in the backyard. I'll put on my steel-toed boots, and in an hour, I'll be doing it okay,
Yeah.
right? Because you have all the fundamentals already built up,
Hmm.
right? And so we have to build up our skill set because a lot of times when guys look at context of being assertive, it's the math equivalent of doing calculus, right?
Yeah.
But they don't know how to add and subtract. I mean, this is where I used to be, right? I've been in this context. Like this is it's experience, right? I wasn't born knowing how to make stuff happen,
Yeah.
right? I had to learn it and I had to figure out, oh, wait a minute, that person's really good at something. That's a skill. How do I baby step my way into getting to that level of competency? Where do I start? Right. And, asking for help, like, and uh, you have to ask multiple people for help because oftentimes the person who's really good at something has no idea how they got there,
Yeah.
right? Because again, it's unconscious competency. You have to find somebody who can maybe who's not nearly as good and say, okay, how'd you get started,
Hmm.
right? And if you're lucky, you find somebody who knows how to teach from the basic level all the way up. I mean, that's why I built 40% better, was because I really wanted to be able to teach people, here's the starting point. This is the most fundamental basic thing you have to be able to do. This is the baby step that starts you on the path. And I know it sounds inconsequential. And you're like, that this isn't hard. And I'm okay, great. Well, then do it. Right.
Hmm.
and and start building on it. And really that's what we need more of across the board. And for guys, once they learn how to do this, being assertive isn't hard anymore. It's easy. And you don't even think about it as being assertive necessarily. Like I don't think about of myself as being assertive. I just think of, oh, there's something I want. How do I get it?
You can just communicate effectively,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I would think and imagine that, like from what I've seen, that this would cause a fair amount of depression amongst men, um, even anxiety, where there's always that question of like, am I good enough?
Yep.
But some other guests talk about that, like with men, right? Because you provider and all that stuff. Like, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? Right. So
Sure.
there's a gap between the skill of being assertive between where you are and where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And without the knowledge of what you're saying of like, okay, there's a path you can take to build up that skill. There's that thought of like, I'm not good enough, and that's why I can't do this. Right. And then if their situation in their life isn't kind of forcing them to do that, like I think of like sales jobs or something, where you have no choice. If you just have a job and, you know, it doesn't force you to do it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's that whole thing. I imagine it would just cause a lot of distress, and even like young men too, like that, it's not necessarily something that anybody talks about that you need to develop very much,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So it's like you have a desire, right? You want to be able to, whatever, you want to be a good salesperson, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nobody's coaching you on how to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
And to make it worse, you don't know that there's a system to be really good at sales that you can practice and get better and better at. It's just like math, right? The reason that if I say what's 7 times 3, you're like, oh, it's 21, right? And that's because you have a lot of homework that you've done as a kid practicing math,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't know about you, but I did memorize multiplication tables, one up to 12, right? That was part of the school system.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
for
think my
sure.
kids had to do that also. So I assume it's still part of the school system.
Yeah.
Uh, but that gives you a competency in math.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that kind of competency in anything else you're doing, and you don't even know that there's a system for it, then yeah, you can be depressed and you can be anxious. And the problem is we don't tell people there's systems for everything.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't know what the system is, and the people around you don't know how to teach you the system,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's, if you want to learn how to write code for a living, there's lots of systems for learning how to code. It's easy to find it, right? Not a problem at all. Super simple. Pick a language, pick a teaching style, whatever it is, you've got that down. If you want to learn how to be assertive, or you want to learn how to be a great leader, you can find books and articles that talk about the problem, but it's rare to find anything that says start at this really, really granular level,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so people don't. That's the problem, is you don't, because there isn't an equivalent in those contexts, like we have in math or swimming or any of a variety of other skills.
Would you say that's what you've done or you're set out to do with 40% better?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because then the way it started was my partner is an occupational therapist who focuses on mental health, and she wanted to know what I was doing that got me these outsized results with software teams. And I've seen the exact same stuff work with software, with first responders, in hospitality. It's not like this stuff in the military. It's not like this stuff only works in the technology world. And I said, I don't know how to explain what I'm doing, because I had this unconscious competency. And she said, well, let me ask you some different questions. And I said, okay, sure, shoot, because if I could explain what I'm doing, that would be great. And so she started asking me questions and said, oh, I know what you're doing. And she was able to help me reverse engineer, first of all, that I had unusual mental models, um, about everything, that most of the other people that were like my peers and even the executives just didn't have those mental models. Two was my focus on skills, and that everything was a skill stack, and that my ability to be successful was because I went after learning skills and leveraging those for the benefit of my team. And again, my peers just weren't doing that. And I've had peers tell me I've pulled off something they thought was impossible, and they say, "Well, how did you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, here's the breakdown. I can tell you, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this." And they're like, "Well, I can't do that." I'm like, "Well, you could. I mean, technically, you could. It's just that you don't want to start, right?" It's like learning how to do math or how to juggle or how to surf. If you want to get good at it, you have to be willing to start and then work your way up the stack. And I think, people are afraid of the struggle, for one, because they don't understand the upside of achieving their goal.
Okay. What would you say would be the first, if we even said like three steps of, let's say there's guys listening that want to be more assertive. Step one being, the pizza example. I don't want green peppers. What would be
Yeah.
like step two and three? Like if we're thinking about small steps.
Um, the pizza example runs out really, really quickly.
Yeah.
You can only go so far with that,
Yeah.
Yeah. um,
And the next
uh,
week, no gluten. And the next
yeah.
week, screw your
Yeah.
pepperoni.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Um, is call up and ask for a pizza refill for free
Yeah.
delivered to your house.
Yeah.
That's week 3.
Yeah.
Um, I think being assertive is a really big bucket,
Yeah.
right? And you've got to get to what's a starting point where you want to be able to communicate effectively and feel like you've been heard, right? Like really, and so it's not just broadly effective, or it's not broadly assertive. It's where's the starting point do you really want to get to,
Hmm.
right? Because there's so many places that, like, I might have grown up thinking it's easy to order pizza without green peppers. I'm assertive in that context all the time, and I don't even think about it.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And yet, for you, you didn't grow up in that context. And for you, that's really, really hard. Right. I'd be like, "Oh, but what's the problem? I don't get, like, I just say I don't want green peppers and it's no big deal. Right. And
Yeah.
for you, you're saying, "Hey, Bill, can you ask for no green peppers on the pizza for me, please?" Because and that for you is a starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like getting somebody else to actually say those words because you're uncomfortable, that's a valid starting point,
Mm.
right? But you're actually voicing your desire. So step one is figuring out, like, what's the context where you want to be heard, right? And you want to be heard effectively, right? You want somebody on the other side to go, "Oh, I hear you and I get it, and yes, we whatever it happens to be, or that thing is going to happen, right? We'll stop putting green peppers on the pizza." Um, but you really have to get clear on what's the context that you're looking at and break it down to what's the valid starting point. So for me, like, effective networking is a type of being assertive, right? Because it's communication, it's talking to people, it's getting to know about them. When I first realized, and this is 25 years ago, 20 years ago, that when I first realized that networking was really important for my career. And by the way, I had social anxiety for 40 years, really, really badly. And so networking I just couldn't do it. Like, I just couldn't go to a networking event, right? Um, I was talking with a friend about it, Like, I can't, like, I need to do this, but I can't. What do I do? And we were talking, and she's like, well, what's the first hurdle? And I said, oh, it's starting conversations. Like, I don't know how to start conversations. And it took more than 5 minutes to figure that out, by the way. It wasn't like quite that fast. Um, but she's like, okay, well, let's figure out a way to get you to practice starting conversations. And I was like, okay, what's how? And we came up with this plan where every time I went to Starbucks to get coffee, I would ask the barista how their day was going. And then whatever they said, I would say, thank you. I hope the rest of the day goes well. And then I would take my coffee and leave. And that sounds inconsequential, but it terrified me.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of actually asking somebody how their day was going was just incredibly scary, right? And when we talked about it at first, I was like, well, that sounds really easy. And she said, okay, well then, let's go try it, right? And the first time I went to go walk in the Starbucks, I was sweating because I was
Mm-hmm.
so afraid of actually starting that conversation. And it was a 2-minute conversation, if or less, right? But I had to start at that tiny baby step. And I did that every day for 2 weeks. Once a day, I would go to Starbucks. I would get whatever, a glass of water, right? And I would do that thing. And exposure therapy, after 2 weeks, I was like, oh, this is actually really, really easy. Like, this is not hard anymore, right? And then I moved up to, okay, how do I have a 5-minute conversation? And so I started going to 5-minute speed networking events, right? And that got me to have an easy, that was the beginning of the progression where, now networking is super easy. I do it all the time. But I had to figure out where I wanted to be assertive, right? What is it? What's the context that you want to be able to talk about, right? Um, do you have a feeling for your audience for where they have challenges?
I would assume the guys that are tuning in have experienced struggles in their life. It's kind of broad with the struggles of man,
Mm-hmm.
but I just know this is such a um, honestly like a universal problem.
Right.
Kind of see it a lot in the world. So I'm not 100% sure of exactly where their state would be, but I think that example you just used is very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
like
Yeah.
with your experience, right? Like I think that's extremely helpful because it's relatable and it's a guy could see like the progression of even if there was something like a conversation, like the struggle with social
Mm-hmm.
interactions, conversations, how they could find their path. I think it's good advice to start with the end in mind, like where you're trying to get to, whether it's like talking to your boss about vacation time or pay or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, and just working your way up step by step to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that as 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 nonlinear as it may sound, when I got comfortable networking and talking with strangers, a lot of other things became much, much easier.
Hmm.
Um, like, for me, interviewing is just super easy and fun now. Like, interviewing for a job, like the last time I had a job interview, a set of job interviews, I thought they were all just highly entertaining. I just had no nerves at all.
Yeah.
Um, and part of it was because I didn't have that fear of talking with strangers anymore. And if you're
Yes.
going to an interview and you're talking with a bunch of strangers, because generally, if you go to an interview, that's what's happening, right? If you have a baseline fear of talking with strangers, like I used to, then you start off in the wrong foot, right? And it doesn't get any better from there because you're already just afraid to talk with people. But
Yeah.
once you can get over being afraid to talk with people, all of a sudden the whole game changes
Hmm.
because you've gotten rid of that baseline fear.
Right.
And so, but when I started working on this, I was I was coming out of a marriage, and so I started dating again. And what thing that was interesting was I found that getting over being afraid of talking with strangers, networking, made talking with new women super easy.
More
Like I
networking.
just wasn't afraid to talk to them anymore, right?
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's an unexpected benefit. I didn't, I wasn't expecting this, right?
Hmm.
But when you get rid of that baseline level, it's kind of like, if you don't know how to swim, you're not going to take up water skiing or surfing or uh, kite surfing or scuba diving or anything, right? Those are all going to be completely off the table for you if you can't swim, because swimming is a gateway sport, right? Once you learn how to swim, all this other stuff becomes possible, right? It's a gateway sport. Talking with strangers is a gateway activity that
Hmm.
opens up all these other doors, right? And so you want to go talk with your boss about a raise. Great. Being comfortable talking with strangers makes it much easier to walk in and say, hey, Matt, how's it going? Um, I'd like to figure out what it's going to take to get paid more here, right? What are the things I need to do to set myself up for a promotion and a bigger paycheck? What does that look like, right?
Hmm.
And being able to have that conversation and and have it in such a way that your boss is your ally in achieving that goal.
Yeah.
Because really, if you want to be assertive, most of the time you want the other person to be happy about whatever it is you're looking for, right? It doesn't make it better if they're pissed off about it, you know. um
That's probably a
Especially
misconception, right? Where it's like that's what the fear is. Like if I'm assertive, if I say what I want, if I ask for what I want, then there's going to be like this
conflict.
fight,
Yeah, yeah. um and and yet
confrontation.
if you do yeah, if you're doing it effectively, the other person has an easy time saying yes,
Hmm.
right? You're part of the process of being assertive is getting them to be your ally and saying, well, of course, I you know, and especially in a work context, building as many allies as you can. This is another reason why networking is so valuable. When you build a bunch of allies inside of a company, that allows you to get whatever you want, because now you know that if you couch your request in ways that are beneficial to all these other people and they'll back you up, you'll get whatever you want.
Right.
And so it's I think part of the reason that people struggle with being assertive is there's this, as you were pointing out, there's this misperception that it's got to be this fight,
Mm.
and it's not, right? It doesn't need to be a fight.
Hmm.
um it should be, you're structuring your request in such a way that the other person has an easy time saying yes,
Right.
right? And this is where it's cool to be a nice guy, right?
Mm.
Because I get what I want, right? I'm nice to people all the time and I get what I want
Yeah.
because I structure it in a way that they're like, well, of course, no problem, it's easy, right?
So you don't got to be an asshole to do it, basically.
No, 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 huh?
I think part of it is letting go of the emotional attachment too, right? For the I want to raise example, right? If you're going into it with like an emotional attachment, it's like, oh, like all that stuff I was talking about before, like if I don't make more money, I'm not good enough. I'm blah blah blah, whatever, whatever, whatever. You go in there and you don't even know what you're gonna say. You don't know how you're gonna have the conversation. You have all this emotion built up. You're like a volcano, and you're almost crying. And then you ask them like, I think I want more money. I need more money. I deserve more money. It's like you're angry,
Right,
and
right,
then
right,
there's no productive conversation there. But if you have
right,
like a tool, language, have this conversation, this is what I'm thinking, what can I do? The emotion, it's all like the emotion behind it is deflated. You can just have the
right.
conversation.
Yeah. Now, you may have a boss who's a jerk,
Yeah.
right? Like that happens, right?
Hmm.
And you will find out where their ego is.
Yeah.
And even given that, if you can figure out how to put this in a way that's beneficial for them, they'll say yes. Right? That's the whole, or you'll learn where their ego is, right? I years ago I was at a company, and the CEO had been in the industry for a long time, like 20 years at that point in time. And the industry had evolved a bit, but the company still was working, had a pretty blue chip client list. Well, the problem was he's using language to talk about the industry that's 20 years old. And people today don't use that language. Like, the industry has evolved enough that even though technically the words he's using are accurate, if you've only been in the industry for 3 years, you have no idea what he's saying, right? You're like, it doesn't match up, right? And that meant he didn't have as much credibility with the marketplace as he should, because he wasn't using the languages that people who had less time, which was most of the paying customers, like, they just didn't understand him, right? And I was new, and like, I was listening to this guy, and I'd been reading up on the industry, and I'm like, why does he always use this kind of language, right? So I started asking people in the company, like, why does he talk about that and everybody else talks about this? I mean, I know that they're the same at a particularly high level, but it doesn't make sense, right? And they're like, oh, nobody can tell him that he's not using the right language. And I said, well, that's a problem, because he's losing credibility, and that's impacting us as a company, right? And it was like a 400-person company. And so I said, okay, I got to change this guy's language, because ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to impact my team, and I'm not cool with that. And so I came up with a presentation and a way to put knowledge in front of him that he didn't know to get him to change his language. And he was in town. There's a distributed company. And I said, hey, I'd like to talk to you for like 15 minutes. And he was like, okay, sure. Scheduled time. I went in, had a presentation. I showed him the wording of all of his peers and everybody that he saw as being on his level in the industry and how they talked about things. I said, here's all these things these guys talk about. This is what all the analysts say. This is all the language everybody uses. People that are writing books, here's the language they use, and here's the words that you use. So technically they're the same thing. The problem is, if you haven't been in the industry for more than 3 years, more than 10 years, you don't know that it's the same thing, and it confuses people. And this is the language people are using today. This is the language your peers are using today. I want you to be an effective communicator. I don't want people to ever think that you don't know what you're talking about. I would appreciate it if you would change your language, because we'll sound more like we know what we're talking about. And he did a presentation literally 5 minutes later, changed all his language, because he knew. Yeah, he knew that he was using old language, but no one had ever laid it out for him, that because of that, he sounded like he didn't know what he was talking about. Right. And
Yeah.
he'd never connected the dots. Right. So what I put it, the context that I gave him was, here's all your peers. Here's how they talk. Right. They're getting all the recognition. You're not.
Yeah.
Here's why. Right.
I think
And
that's a
so,
great, perfect example of how being nice or being agreeable is not
yeah,
always nice.
yeah, yeah,
It's not actually nice.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I
So,
mean? Being nice is not kind, or something like that.
yeah,
Some
yeah.
word.
I wasn't necessarily kind, but I presented in a way that for him it was like, I assumed that he didn't know it. Right. I didn't go in and say, dude, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Right. I just went in and said, here's all the data. Like, you should think about this. And he
Yeah.
got it. Right. Um, so the way that you present it, right?
Yeah.
And before I talked to him, I talked to a bunch of people in the business to ask them, like, was there something that I didn't know that I didn't know that made the way that he was talking seem brilliant, and I just didn't get it? And they all said, no, it's, he's using 20-year-old language because he's been in the industry that long, and he just thinks everybody knows what he's talking about. And I said, okay, that doesn't work. Right? It just doesn't work.
Was he
So
appreciative of it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was interesting. I had to at that company. My team had to re-architect one of the core in-house tools that that company used, and that meant we had to completely redesign business processes that impacted literally 95% of the company. And we got everybody to do it. You know, my UI designer came up with this whole different business process, and he presented it, and he's like, "This is nothing like the company works today, and I don't know how to get the company to buy into this, but it's the only way to solve this problem we have." And I said, "Okay, you know, let's look at it. Let's break it down. Let's talk about how this works, right? Help me understand everything." And then I started building allies inside the company, and I went to different people that were going to be impacted by this change, and I showed it to them, and I walked them through it, and I got them to say yes. And we started doing um, we built a clickable mock-up that actually was functional. um, Started testing and getting people to like actually play with this thing and use it. And I went through everybody in the company I could think of except the CEO, who had to say yes to it, and then went and presented to him. And when I went to present it, I said, here's all the problems we have. Here's usability and technical architecture behind the scenes, right? So he really got all that. And I said, we're already crashing servers. We've maxed out our architecture. We can't throw more servers at the problem. We have to do something new from scratch. We've come up with a whole new business process we want to use. And I've already run it by all these people in the company, and they like it. And here's how we'd like to do this. And I showed it to him, and he was like, this is nothing like what we're doing today. Are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, it's totally different, but it's the only way to solve the problem. We can't come up with another way to solve the problem any better. And he goes, well, okay, what does this person say? I'm like, they love it. What about this person? They love it. What about this person? They love it. What about this person? They love it. And he said, really? And I'm like, I talked to everybody before I came to you. He's like, can I talk to them about it? I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. Go talk to them. The next day he emailed me and said, go, you get to do whatever you want to. Right. But I made it easy for him to say yes. I did all the homework.
Yeah.
Right. To get him to say yes. Right. And there's a huge part of being assertive that is making it easy for them to say yes. Right.
Yeah.
So I have to do a lot of work in advance. Right. I have to do a lot of homework, but their yes is really easy for them.
Because of all the homework.
Because all the homework I did. Yeah.
And the way you presented it.
If I just walked in cold and said, we need to change our business process and I want to do this thing, and I didn't have all the homework lined up, you would have said no.
Yeah.
Nope, not a chance. We're not doing it. Mm-hmm. Right. But because I did all this other stuff in advance, when I went in and said, here's what I want, it was easy for him to go, oh my God, okay. Yeah. And I did some back checking afterwards. He called 2 people. Out of all the people he could have called, he called 2 people and said, what do you think of Bill's idea? And they said, we want it right now. And that was it. He got 2 calls in and stopped, because those are the people he cared about most. And I'd already built that stack of allies behind me, which made it, because I knew he was going to check with these people, right? I knew that's how it was going to play out. And so, and I also knew that if I ever needed to, I could call a meeting and get all of them to go sit with him and say, hey, we really need this, and just overwhelm him with numbers. But I never had to do that, right? But I was clear on what I wanted, right? This goes back to, what is it that you want to be assertive about, and get really clear on that thing, right? And then be able to, okay, how does this start, right? What's the base skill I have to learn to start building on the stack so that I can be assertive?
Doing the homework is the proper way.
Yeah.
Opposed to the other way. So it's like, it goes back to your coach, the coach that was just telling you and the coach that was telling you why.
Exactly. Yeah.
He did the homework.
Yep.
or
Yep.
at least he told you about the homework, depending on.
Yeah. Yeah. And he put it in my language, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm sure when he was coaching somebody else, he used different words with them,
Mhm.
right? Because they swam different strokes and they were different body configuration. And it's customized, right?
Mhm.
There's there's uh, there's general abstractions, and then there's what's the detail, right? It's like cars all have wheels and tires and brakes, but there's a lot of different tires on cars and a lot of different wheel sizes and all kinds of different brake styles, right? And when you understand that, you can start to go, okay, what's the differences, right? Which one what do I need to do? And it's the same thing with when you want to be assertive. It's what's the stuff you need to bring to the table to have the other person be an easy yes.
That is very helpful, Bill. I want to say thank you again for coming on
Oh, of course,
and
yeah,
sharing this stuff.
yeah,
I really appreciate it. Where can people find your stuff? I think it's 40%better.com.
yeah. 40%better.com. Super simple, long URL, but it's just like all those words are spelled. Number 40% better. I'm Bill at 40%better.com. We do leadership training, and it's really about how do you get high performance out of your teams. And if you need to start with how do you get any performance because your teams are disconnected, that's part of the path. Is to go from low engagement to high engagement in your teams. And the thing that I see right now is a lot of leaders, and doesn't matter if they're male or female, both sides have the same problem. They're taking for granted that the disengagement on their team is normal, and it's not. But they haven't learned a process to get a high degree of engagement out of their team, and that's really the problem. They just don't know how to do it.
Okay. Um, is there any closing remarks you'd like to say, thinking about men's struggles? If there's any guys listening that
Yeah, I think I've certainly had my share of struggles as a male, um, and I guess one, I always looked at problems as solvable. I never thought that there was a problem that was unsolvable. And even in my darkest moments, I knew that for somebody with the thing I was struggling with, they knew how to do it and they knew how to do it well. I just wasn't there. And so there's a system and a process for anything you want to do. Doesn't matter, like literally everything you want. And if you can recognize that and then get curious about, okay, where and how do I learn that? For me, it was an amazing level of emotional freedom because I recognize now that whenever I'm struggling, it's just because I don't know how to do something elegantly. And somebody else does, and I can learn it. And then I'm on my way.
okay, that's awesome, man.
Thank
Well,
you. Thank you.
thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, more people need to know this stuff. It's uh, um, upgrading our mental health is a really important thing for us to do.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, Bill. We'll talk
Yeah,
again
thank you.
soon.
Okay. Have a good one. Thank you.
You too.